Well, folks, this is Bob Kozo, the host of the Do It Yourself Forestry podcast, where we teach you how to do forestry yourself. Today is episode 2 of the Do It Yourself Forestry podcast, and hopefully there'll be a third one. Today is the day before Easter of 2016, and I'm here in northern Minnesota. I'm looking out my window. It's snowing. It's about 27 degrees outside, the weather bug says here on my computer. There's white stuff on the ground, there's white stuff in the air, which for up here where I'm at, that's pretty normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. And hopefully it'll all melt and we'll get spring. Usually it does melt. There's been a couple years where that's been questionable. I know it was about 3 years ago up here where their guys were still ice fishing in the middle of May. So, well, we don't need that again. But it's getting here. We'll get some warm weather. We've had some warm weather, extremely warm for March. But then it got cold again. I'm looking by next weekend we're gonna have some lows in the single digits, so that'll be good. But anyways, as I was looking out the window, today is not exactly a day that I'd want to be out in the woods doing stuff. And I got to thinking, well, what could a person do this time of year when especially where I'm at? Places down south, it might be a month ago that you'd be doing something like this because of the weather. What could you do inside that would help you with your forest, the work that you want to do on your land, the forestry work you want to accomplish on your land, any wildlife projects? What could you do then? If you're in way south, you could probably go out and do stuff because it's not 30 below and 4 foot of snow out there. But if you're like me, it's 30 below and has 4 foot of snow. So what's something you could do that's around this time of year that'd be a good thing to do to help things along? I think the most important thing you could do is to start setting your goals for the year. And not just for the year, but maybe 5 years, 10 years, long-term goals as well, what you want to see happen to your property over the course of your lifetime. And I'm going to go over some things today that's no different than when you're setting a goal with a lot of other things in life. I'm just going to try and show you why it's relevant to forestry and land management. But I just want to reiterate, you really need to do something like this. You don't have to get as in-depth as I'm going to explain some of the stuff, especially if you just have simple, couple straightforward goals with your land, just keep it in your head and go from there. But if you got a lot of things you want to do, or maybe you just bought a newer piece of property and you want to get it set up the way you want it, now would be a good time to sit down, I would say with a pen and paper, if you really got a lot you want to do, and start charting stuff down to track what you want to do. Just, there's so much going on in life in general, not just with your land, but just in life general. You forget things. You're trying to remember 10,000 different things at once, and you're going to forget that 10,000 first thing that was actually important or that you really wanted to do. And besides that, and I'm going to get a little more philosophical and than just talking about trees here, but, when you start doing like things like that, and something I have to do better myself, not just for forestry, but for everything, is when you try and remember all that kind of stuff, constantly just, I'll remember this, I'll remember that, I'll take a mental note of that. You wear your brain out. And if you're like me, you don't got a lot to begin with. So you're constantly worn out and you're forgetting stuff and you feel stressed because you got 10,001 things you want to do and you don't want to forget that last thing. And I found if it's just as simple as taking a cheap 99-cent notebook and just writing some things down, really takes a lot off the old noggin. Really relieves a little bit of stress. And it really helps you stay focused on what you're doing. And that's what I think is really important about it. Is when you document those kinds of things, it gives you something to shoot for. It's a checklist, and that's key. Having a checklist really helps things along. When you start checking things off that list, you start feeling good, and you start feeling like you accomplished stuff, and you did, and you just keep going with it. You start building momentum, and then all of a sudden, all those 10,001 things are done, and you didn't forget any of them. So that's why I think it's important to, spend some time. You could do it in an evening. This isn't some, you're not doing a college thesis here. Just something to write down, piece of paper, and write down what you want to do. Now, the other reason to do this is not just for your own sanity, but if you have no goals, it's hard to come up with a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you're not going to get any results. And the whole point of doing anything like this is to have results, have positive results for your property. You want more wildlife, you want better trees, you want, maple syrup production, more firewood, whatever it is that you want to do. You want all that. So you need to have a plan on how you're going to accomplish this. Now, just going out and saying, I want to start a sugar bush for maple syruping. Okay, that's great, especially if you bought a piece of property that has a lot of old trees, or maybe they had some maple syrup production. But what if there's not? What if there's not a lot of sugar maples out there? Maybe there's a few, but not enough, or they're young, or you don't have the facility. Maybe you got the trees, but you don't got the equipment to make the syrup. You start putting that all in your head, that becomes extremely daunting to accomplish all those things. And it's no different than anything else. If you want to put a food plot in for wildlife, if you want to do some other kinds of wildlife projects like birdhouses, brush piles, whatever, things like that, planting specific species to make it more attractive to wildlife. When you start thinking of it as a whole, it gets real daunting real quick. I think that's why a lot of people have a hard time accomplishing their goals. Is they think it's one big thing, you got to do it, and it's got to be done yesterday. So if I can't do it if I couldn't have gotten it done yesterday, then I'll just go watch TV. Instead of doing that, there's the old saying, "How do you eat an elephant?" And the answer is one piece at a time. Another saying that's a little more relevant to forestry is little strokes fall great oaks. Now, you don't have to go cut down an oak tree to make that, saying applicable, but I think you get the point. I'm sorry, I got a goofy thing going on with my throat today. I'm trying to drink some tea and water to help that. And another thing I think gets in the way with people when they're trying to do this, besides just, everything being so daunting, is they spend so much time researching and watching YouTube and reading books and articles and this and that and the other thing. And that's all great, and you should always be doing that. You should always continually be learning something. But at some point within that, you got to stop being a content chaser. That one more article you're going to read is not going to solve all your problems. What's going to solve your problems is taking what you've learned from all the other articles you've read and going and trying something. You really got to do that. I've been guilty of this too. I'm not trying to, sound much, holier than thou type, but I've done it a lot, and this is why I'm explaining this to you. I've finally realized over time, at some point, you got to go do something. And I understand if you've never dealt with any of this stuff, it can be very daunting, but that's what do-it-yourself forestry is here for, to try and explain a lot of this stuff. And there's some other good, a few other resources out there that'll help. There's a lot of decent books out there. A lot of the other stuff is a little bit more geared towards like deer hunting, deer management, turkey management. But if you just, you take that out of that, if you don't want to shoot, you don't want to hunt deer, they're still doing good quality land management. So watching those things that help, if the forestry, do-it-yourself forestry, I want to bring you more of the timber end of things. If you want to do saw log, if you want to manage your wood for timber harvesting, or hopefully I'll try and find somebody who could talk better about maple syrup than I can. Things like that. Those are just some examples of what I want to explain to you with this blog and podcast. But going back to the content, you got to research. It's good to research, but just go do something. I think a lot of people have problems. They think they're going to just screw up their land so bad that it's going to, might as well just plow it all up, pave it, and make it a parking lot. people don't realize how bad you really got to screw things up to make it to the point of unrepairable. I mean, you really got to do a number on stuff. Basically, turn it into a parking lot is the only way to truly screw it up. There's usually a way to fix something. If you don't know it right away, try different things. Talk to people. Talk to farmers, talk to foresters, wildlife biologists, talk to hunters, trappers, county plow guys. Talk to everybody that you can about these things. Somebody will have an idea that'll work. So don't get caught down on the fact that you're just going to obliterate your land and nothing's going to grow and all the animals are going to run away. That's not going to happen. I said it. You won't screw up your land. Okay, now that that's said, you got to do stuff. But you got to do things planned. Don't just do things willy-nilly and scatterbrained. Because what happens, I'll give you an example I came up with. This is going to be a little far-fetched, but I bet somebody's done this. And I've done things similar in life, just not with land management. Say you are a deer hunter. So you want to do food plots. You want to do some other little things and make better deer habitat. But you also want to build some bird houses because you like, a variety of wildlife, and that's better for the land as well to have a variety. So you want to build bird nesting houses. You want to cut firewood. You want to cut firewood for your shop and your house. And maybe you want to do some tree planting. Well, what happens is you get so bogged down looking up what you want to plant in your food plot because deer hunting's your priority. You get so bogged down in the details of what species, what brand, this, that, everything else, that you forget to, plan out your planting, which honestly is probably a bit more important than trying to get your food plot in. So you didn't plan your tree planting for this spring. You didn't order trees. You didn't get your site ready. You didn't plan it out. So that's not done. Now, because you're still too busy figuring out which seed you wanted to buy and how to do it and how am I going to get money for a tractor and all this other stuff, you never went and cut firewood. So now you don't have firewood. So when you go to build your bird houses for the birdhouse, the nesting boxes, you don't have any firewood to heat up your wood shop. So you can't wait till the spring to build your bird houses. But when spring comes, you finally did decide which seed to buy. So now you got to go out there and plant the seed. But you're so busy deciding what brand of seed you wanted to buy, you didn't learn how to plant that seed. So now you're running around trying to figure out how to plant the seed, where to get a tractor, can you pay somebody, rent something, this and that. Meanwhile, your trees still aren't going to get planted, which didn't matter anyways because you never bought them because you were too busy with the food plot seeds. And yeah, your birdhouses still aren't built either because you waited till spring till it warms up. Well, you got to go out there with the food plot. Now summer comes along and maybe you finally get the birdhouses built and get them up, but now the birds aren't going to be nesting into them until next spring anyways. So maybe now if the birdhouse is up and the food plot's out there and you figured out which seed you got that works for you, maybe you could start planning your planting, and somewhere in there you got to figure out your firewood. It's usually how people do things. I've done them too. Now, a better way to have done that scenario would have been to really sit down and really prioritize what you want to do. Is deer hunting your top priority? If it is, then maybe you do want to spend more time with your food plots. And that's fine, but you got to recognize that. Trying to do 12 things at once isn't going to get you anything done. So so you got your food plots is your priority. So you put all your energy into that. Now everything else, and I hate to say this, but you're going to have to put it off to the side for a bit. You want to focus on one thing at a time. Now you could do this over the course of a couple months and plan a lot of stuff out, as long as you have a good plan to execute. So you could plan your food plots, you could plan your tree planting, you could plan your birdhouses, and you could plan your firewood. But just don't try and do it all at once. Spend your time figuring out your food plots. Don't get bogged down in the details with that stuff. Just pick some seed and put it out there. The deer, if it's good, they'll eat it. If it's not good, they won't eat it. And then don't plant that again. Because, another way to think about things and how I like to think about things is if I had cut my firewood like I was supposed to, and I had a mild winter like we did, well, you're probably going to save some money on your heating bill if you have supplemental heat, propane, fuel oil, electric, what have you. Well, maybe if because you've cut your firewood when you should have and you did the right amount, you save money on your heating. Well, maybe if that saved money, might be a lot, it might not be, but you might have enough to buy a couple different kinds of seed for your food plot. So you could shorten that learning curve as far as what works and what doesn't. See where I'm going? When you start planning things out right because you cut your firewood properly, you're able to expand your food plot more. Now that you got your food plot, you got your firewood squared away, you got your food plot squared away, you could go build your birdhouses, which, if you're a handy guy, it probably is just a, afternoon project to throw together a couple birdhouses. They don't got to be, aviary Taj Mahals. They just got to be pieces of wood nailed together with a hole in them, basically. So now your birdhouses are done. Now you can start looking for your tree planting maybe. Or maybe those three things with the firewooding, the food plots, and your little birdhouses, maybe that's enough for you for the year. Maybe that's all you're capable of doing. Maybe, finances, whatever. Or maybe that's all you want to do. Or you got a big tree planting project that you want to do. And trying to get into food plots kind of wiped out the money for the tree planting. So then you start planning out what you want to plant, where you want to plant, all that stuff for your future tree planting. Now, you see how much better that went? It was just a little bit of thinking and planning and prioritizing what you want to do. You got everything done. Now, it might have took a little bit longer than you thought it was, but it might not really have taken any longer than if you'd just done the scatterbrain approach. And everything was done a lot easier. You were a lot less stressed out, and you probably maybe even saved a little bit of money because you didn't have to go buy a bunch of extra stuff you didn't know about because you spent enough time doing the right research. Which kind of brings me to another point that when you sit down and you look at things and you prioritize things, be very cognizant of what's, number one on your list. You start doing, you're going to have to make some sacrifices now for things to be better in the future. And when you start doing that thing, it's almost, when you start doing things like that, it's almost like that success is compounded over time. You do these little things right, you plan them out properly, you do them the right way. Even if you have some sort of setback in there, over time, it just seems like everything comes together much better than when you just shotgun it out there and hope for the best. So that's why it's real important that you understand that you're going to have to give up some things in the beginning to get what you want in the future. And that's okay, because that's just the way it is. That's how it works. I wish I had a little bit more explanation for that, but I could just, life experience and what I've seen from other folks. When you do that it's exponential. It's compounding. It's the only best way I could think about it. So take that time. Take those little do not take those little shortcuts in the scatterbrain. Do what you want to do, but do it right and do it planned well. And you'll see over time, all of a sudden, things start being successful and things start coming together. And all of a sudden, you just got this beautiful piece of land where deer are fighting each other to get to there, and there's birds all over the place and trees growing, and it's, utopia. Now, all that being said, I mentioned in there that things might not always, go exactly as you plan. There might be little setbacks. No problem. Just roll with them. But with that, you want to try as best as you can to have some alternative plans. You don't got to get too serious with this. You might not even have to write it down or, track them or anything, but have some things in the back. That's maybe where you could have the things in the back of your head going, well, if this doesn't work, I could probably do this, or, maybe do a little bit of research on the things just so you know. But that's where that continuing education, I call it, comes into play. You always want to be keeping your, I told you, don't chase content and don't get so bogged down in the details that you can't do nothing. But at the same time, it's good to keep your thumb on, on the pulse of things. Well, read articles, watch YouTube videos. If it was you and this is something you really enjoy, managing your land, that's going to be almost a form of entertainment to you. It's going to be better than watching, Dancing with the Stars, whatever other junk's on the TV these days. So that's really not, to me, content chasing. You enjoy that. It's a little educational, but you're not getting bogged down by it. You're not letting it control you. You're still getting stuff done, but you're always getting ideas in the back of your head going of what you could do next. What could I do if this doesn't work? Or maybe find a way to improve something you're already doing. So always, keep up with that stuff. Don't throw that away, because it'll help you with those alternatives if something does arise. And then within each plan you have, you got to break things down into smaller details. Let's take the tree planting. You want to plant trees. That's the goal. Okay. Well, you need trees to plant. Where am I going to get them? How am I going to get them? What do I do with them when I get them? Can I, and then that sounds, I know, well, I just plant them in the ground. Well, yeah, but sometimes, maybe the weather's not cooperative, or they have a tree drop-off date somewhere that you're getting your trees from, and you can't do it for a few days for whatever reason. How would you store the trees? Where can you store the trees? How many people do I need to plant, how many people might I need to plant these trees if it's a real lot of them? Or are you just planting, 20, 40, 50 trees? You could do it yourself in an afternoon, no big deal with a shovel. Where am I going to plant them? What species am I going to plant? And that sounds a little daunting, but if you start breaking all that down before it's time to plant the trees, and you start figuring all that out, it almost becomes fun, because you're doing something you want, where you want, and how you want to do it. But if it's all of a sudden, a lot of places in the country are starting to plant trees now, let's just say mid-April, the beginning of May, and you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to go plant some trees, by God, right now. And then you're running around trying to find trees, find people to plant them, this and that. Whereas if you'd spent the time now to sit down, figure it all out, you'd be way ahead. I mean, really, if you have some idea of what's going on in your land and what you want to do, figuring that tree planting out shouldn't take more than a morning, afternoon maybe. How to do it, species, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of info that you could find on the internet that's good. And again, you're not going to screw it up. If you're putting trees in the ground, you're going to be successful. Some of them might die. Most of them might probably live. That's just nature. Trees die in nature all the time. I wouldn't sweat it. Just replace them next spring with different trees. So don't get too bogged down in that. Now, to wrap up the show, the one thing I want to, really point out to you, and that you should be mindful of when you're doing all this, is to just enjoy all this. This is your land. You're managing it how you want to. Don't get so bogged down and so stressed out that this isn't fun anymore. That's why I keep telling you, you're not going to screw this up. You got to really try to screw up your land, because you want to enjoy this. You bought this land, either, maybe you inherited it, probably bought it. You bought it to enjoy, so do that. Don't get so stressed out and worked up over my soil pH isn't proper for this, and I got this going on, and I can't put a trail here. Or just take a step back, take a deep breath, and just enjoy it. Go for a walk in your woods. Remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing, because that's what it's all about. Years ago, land ownership seemed to be more for commercial purposes, for big logging companies, big farm corporations, things like that. Now it's more and more people are just buying their own little piece of paradise. They want to retire to, relax to, whatever they want to do with it. So do that. Enjoy yourself when you're out there. Enjoy yourself when you're doing the work. If it's becoming way too much work that you want to do, then don't do it. It's that simple. I don't know what much else to say about that. If you don't like what you're doing, then don't do it on your land. Or figure out an alternative. You can get creative. Worst case scenario, probably find a neighbor kid to pay $50 to go do a bunch of physical labor. He'll probably do it. So don't get too worried about that either. So that's kind of going to wrap up today's show. I hope you found that enjoyable. Hope you found it informative. And you folks have a good day.